ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be starting the Q&A now. We've got an eclectic group of people. Let's see, first I would like to welcome to the stage Charles Bernstein, composer of the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Come on out, Charles! Here's Fierberg, Cinematographer from Nightmare on Elm Street. He was one of the creative minds who brought you Freddy's Nightmares. Anybody? Matsui, everybody. Brought Matsui. He made Carlos' head explode in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6. Come on out there. Now we have John Skipp coming up, the writer of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. And of course we have Miko Hughes from Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And then from Freddy versus Jason, we have Zack.
Freddy versus Jason, let's go!
Well, I'll take a seat here if you'd like. So we need some musical chairs, perhaps.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah! Andrew! Somebody shoot him ahead. Thank you, Ed. This is Andrew. He brought to you a documentary, right? If you know a piece of Freddy Krueger, facts and stuff like that, it came from this documentary. Let's get the show rolling. Charles, the first nightmare. It's this movie about some crazy dreams in the sky with blades. How do you decide on the style? What influences, drove you when you had to provide this music, this great theme that is both terrifying, but it can also be somber and, really tug at you when you're thinking about your friends that got killed by Freddy Krueger.
Well, okay. First of all, let's give a hand to Cody, who put all of this up. It's really kind of fun to celebrate Freddy's birthday tonight. When you think about it, he's 40. I remember seeing this movie for the first time. I've maybe only seen it on the big screen a couple of times. I saw it when it was screened originally 40 years ago, and Johnny Depp, I think he was like 16 or something, was in a little screening room, Heather, and I got all the folks. And I had the feeling tonight, had the same feeling the first time I saw it. This movie works. It hangs together, it looks good, but I didn't know that when I got involved originally. I was thinking, I don't think this movie's going to see the light of day. It was a work print, it was black and white. A lot of scenes were just slugged in because they hadn't done the visual effects. It was kind of I honestly didn't think it was a good idea to do. I remember one scene in particular, and I was thinking about it tonight. It's that scene where the plastic tongue comes out of the phone. I was watching the black and white work print on a VHS at home, and I just remember when that tongue shot out, I got up and hit the pause button, and I just said, Charles, what are you doing? What is this? It was one of those moments where I just, was kind of baffled by the style. And yet, one of the beautiful things about Wes, who was a beautiful man, and I loved working with him, he knew how to put some humor in the way Hitchcock could do that, and some other great directors. And I realized there's a lot of little touches, like when she says, she looks, oh my God, I look 20 or whatever that line is. There's humor in there. And all along, and the way Ronnie's part is played, the mom, where there's a self-awareness to the movie. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why 40 years later we're still watching it. You asked about the theme. I think I was in reel 3 of composing the music for this, and I went to Wes and I said, wouldn't it be kind of nice if there was a theme that just kind of went through the movie, a melody that you could actually And I was worried that he just wanted scary stuff to happen, maybe. I didn't know Wes that well. And the flavor of the movie felt like it would benefit from this kind of approach. And lo and behold, Wes said, what a great idea. And I was so worried that I was going to have to toss that. So I went back to the first 2 reels and kind of worked the melody in. And throughout the picture, I found it to be very effective in tying the movie together. I had that feeling again tonight. And it was, all in all, a good experience for me.
Wow. And for those who might not know, what are some of the other great horror movies that you worked on previously?
It's interesting. I get a lot of attention for my horror scores. The truth is, I've done 130 feature-length films, a lot of work, and maybe 5, half a dozen or so were horror movies. The horror movies are the ones that this kind of thing happens for. The horror fans are enduring. So the, I don't know, I would say maybe The Entity with Barbara Hershey, Sid Fury directed, wonderful movie. Cujo, which was a Stephen King book about the dog. I actually did the sequel to Rosemary's Baby with Gordon Rabeland, a really great cast, but it was a television production. So some people are aware of that one. There are a few more, Deadly Friend. I'm not thinking of all of them, but April Fool's Day, which is kind of a they just released a vinyl, Rumpelstiltskin, which is by the guys who made Leprechaun, kind of a, so not many more, and yet those are the ones that people are aware of, so it's kind of interesting.
Thank you, Charles.
You bet.
Stephen. These films are so much about visuals, especially when it comes to the nightmares. Tell us a little bit about, bringing the nightmares to the screen and showing us, all of these wacky things.
Well, I think that, I actually made a point when I got hired to do Nightmare 4, I made a point of not watching the other 3 before it. And I wanted to just, and I really had terrible nightmares when I was growing up, and so I was actually afraid of horror films, and I saw Eyes Without a Face, and it terrified me when I was 6 years old, and so I didn't watch horror movies for many, many years. And then I just watched it a year ago. I can probably handle it now. And it's really scary, Eyes Without a Face. Anyway, it's really disturbing. But so when I got hired or interviewed to do this, they showed me these beautiful storyboards which had been used to do this. And it's very important, especially in those days with no digital effects. You have to draw a picture of what you want. And if you draw the picture, and you go and we would all get together, and we would every morning we go, okay, let's go through the pictures, and there'd be like a stack of 50 shots. And how are we going to do this one? And we'd be in the room and go, no, I don't know how to do that. Okay, put that in the pile. We'll come back to it tomorrow. And then we get the next one. And by the time, like 4 weeks later, we had figured out how to do any shot we could possibly imagine. Yeah. And it was a great lesson to me. If you can think of it, if you can draw it, you can shoot it. That's before any digital effect. But what I did is I thought, well, I have these terrible nightmares, and I think it's time for me to just use them instead of run away from them. I'm just going to let all those things that frighten me, like, go into my head, and then I would be walking down the street, or I'd be wake up in the middle of the night going, oh, I could do that, I could do that. And so I kind of tried to access my subconscious that I had kind of kept down in order to do the movie.
That's great. You can control the nightmare, creativity. Thank you so much, Stephen. Let's go on to Jeff. Jeff, Freddy's Nightmares. Freddy going to the small screen. Tell us, how did that happen?
Well, this is my first opportunity to ever wear this shirt, so I thought I would wear it for today. A cinematographer that I worked with a few years ago found this in a used clothing store in Atlanta and brought it to me on the set and said, "Here." And I went, "Wow, I've never seen this in my life." I didn't know whether or not they made this when the show first came out, but I'm proud to wear it tonight. This is great. I just want to say something before I talk about the TV show. How about that score that Charles Bernstein had? That score, and I'm a producer and director and writer, but that score changed music, especially in horror movies, but in general. It was the most off-the-nose score that one can imagine. When you watch a film like A Nightmare on Elm Street, you expect something different. You don't expect a lullaby. And that's what you got. And it was creepy, and it was wonderful, and it was unparalleled. So thank you. I appreciate it. Nightmare 4 was in post-production. Randy Harlan was working on that in 1988. It was during the writer's strike of 1988. It's the longest strike, I think, that we ever had. It was also the most painful to many people. But the studio that I worked for, which was Lorimar and Warner Brothers, came to me and said, and I was on an overall deal there for a very long time, and at that point they came to me and they said, "Look, we're going to get together with New Line, and we're talking about making Nightmare on Elm Street into a television series." And first of all, I said, "Well, there's a writer's strike. I really don't want to talk to you about this right now." But I watched the films because I hadn't seen them. I watched 1, 2, and 3, and I was knocked out. And I was never really a big horror fan. My background was in drama, and I wrote and produced The Incredible Hulk for television and Battlestar Galactica. I had done a lot of sci-fi fantasy, but I hadn't done horror. And I hadn't done horror because I really never connected with it. And what I realized about what Wes Craven had created, which is really genius, and as I'm watching it again, I was knocked out by it, is that it's a totally accessible story. It combines so many different themes, one of which is the total disconnect between adults and their teenagers, the struggle for teens to take control of their lives themselves, because that's all they've got. The fact that we have all had experiences in our lives where we wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and think that our dream was real. And I could go on and on and on about all of the other things that are in this, but this was a lot more than just somebody walking around with a bunch of knives on a hand. It's a very deep story. But to turn it into a television show was a crazy challenge, because I was given a bunch of rules that were almost impossible to follow. I was lucky that I had a lot of help, but here are some of the rules. First of all, Warner Brothers wanted to be able to take the hours and split them into half hours and strip them. We were given 22 episodes to start with, which meant 44 stories. But we had no money. They were giving us $500,000 an episode, which in comparison to today's television is probably about 7% of what the average drama costs today. I came back with, well, I want to use the same actors in both half hours, because otherwise we'll never be able to afford it, and we can't shoot it. We can't shoot 2 half hours in 6 days separately. So that was part of it. Next, they said you can't have Freddy Krueger. That kind of threw me for a loop momentarily, and I said, well, why? And Bob Shea was my partner. I mean, we were executive producers together on it, and we had these meetings privately, so there wasn't a lot of, like gasping on the part of people listening to this, but it was because he was afraid that if we had made a television show and overused Robert's part, that it would dilute the franchise, and he wouldn't be able to make all of the movies that everybody else in this panel were part of in the future. So we had to use Freddy Krueger in a different way. And I kind of begged and bargained and wound up using Robert Englund 3 times in the first episode, which became the genesis of Freddy Krueger. In the first episode, for those who have never seen the show, and I'm sure that goes for most of you in the audience, we did the genesis. We did Freddy Krueger as an ice cream man. He gets caught, he gets burned, he dies at the end of the first half hour, and he comes back to seek revenge on basically the cop that John Saxon plays in the movie. But it was the sheriff, and he had 2 daughters, and we go back and get the daughters in the 6th episode, I think. We got to use him one more time during the Halloween special, where Mariska Hargitay is a student at college, and she's in the science class, and he's haunting her. And we got to use him one more time. But we had to have him. I mean, my argument was, you're going to do Nightmare on Elm Street, you have to have Freddy Krueger. So how can we use Freddy Krueger differently? Their idea was that you just slap the title on the show and it becomes Nightmare on Elm Street, which I think anybody who is a fan of the show, of the movies, would never have wanted to watch. Right? So I had taken one writing course in my life, which was in college at Antioch in Ohio, from Rod Serling, who was an alumnus who came to teach, and there were just a handful of us in the class. And I kind of thought about this as the Twilight Zone, because there were a lot of thematic similarities between the Twilight Zone and Nightmare on Elm Street. There's an alternate reality, basically, that's established that kind of digs into our deepest fears. And what I thought might be interesting, and when I use I'm really exaggerating. It was not just me. I was surrounded by some incredibly talented people. Mike DeLuca worked as kind of my assistant. He was fresh out of NYU Film School. He was an intern at New Line, and Bob Shea asked me to use him on the show because he knew everything about Nightmare on Elm Street, and he knew what they were planning to do in the future, and we wouldn't replicate it. We wouldn't kind of spoil the legacy of that franchise. Jonathan Betchell, Jay Cappy, we had some terrific directors. Toby Hooper directed the pilot. We had, I can't list all of the people, but there were so many talented people. It's a team sport that we all work in, and none of us do it on our own. So I'll try to avoid in the future, like one of our presidential candidates can't. But the concept of taking for each of those 88 stories that we did over the course of 2 seasons, one of our deepest fears, speaking in public, getting married, joining a sorority, taking a standardized test, every possible thing that all of us wake up in a cold sweat about is what we try to make into this series. We tried to blend this into the series. And Freddy Krueger would introduce it, and every once in a while would pop up, but not as a physical force, but as something in the ether. And so the show went into production in 1988, and one of my rules was to Warner Brothers, this is going to be the goriest show that's ever been on television. Don't sell it. It was syndicated, by the way. And for those of you who don't know what syndicated television is, it was not network television. It wasn't ABC, CBS, Fox, or NBC. It was sold to individual local stations, and it was sold all over the country, and actually all over the world. And it was for them to decide when it was on the air. And I pleaded with Warner Brothers to not let it run at 6 o'clock on a Sunday night in Philadelphia. Just not the right show. And what happened? It ran at 6 o'clock on a Sunday night in Philadelphia. and it ran at 11 o'clock in Los Angeles. And it ran at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Chicago. And it ran at all kinds of different times because they stuck it where it worked. And as a result, it had a tremendous backlash from the audience and from the people. You know, I mean, the articles that were written about it were kind of painful and at the same time delightful to me because we were actually accomplishing our purpose and turning a lot of people off. But at the same time, it was just misused. So I'm sorry to run on, but that's the story of the series, and that's what happened.
Thank you so much. We're out of a little bit of order, but Rod, you created the effects for
The effects?
for Robert Englund's favorite.
Did you use the word effect?
Oh, that's right. It's
We
not,
don't use
it's not
that
an
word.
effect. What do we call it?
I don't like the term special effects, guys. I am a prosthetic makeup artist and designer. Okay.
Now, you created what Robert Englund has called his favorite kill. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. When I'm not writing and directing, I occasionally do special makeup, prosthetics and such. And apparently Robert really liked the scene. It's a very long, protracted, torturous scene, arguably the most elaborate big deal of the film, Part 6, which is actually a very comedic film. It's not hardcore horror. As you all know, it's quite a funny film. It's punctuated by moments of horror. What was the question again?
If you want to talk a little bit about that scene and
About what scene?
with Carlos and the head explosion in his ear.
Well, as you recall, do you guys remember the Carlos scene? Do you guys know the Carlos scene? With Ricky Dean Logan. Ricky Dean Logan plays Carlos. He's a one-take wonder. We usually did 3 takes. Usually he was dead on the first time. No, I mean like he was right on the first time. Right. Second take, he'd usually amp it up a little bit because Rachel might ask for a bit more. Rachel Talalay, the director. And then the third take, usually he'd take it down a little bit, but usually he nailed it the first time. I was talking to Cody yesterday about production time and the fact that when you have these kinds of experimental prosthetic makeups that have mechanisms, bladders, and such installed inside the skin, the false skin that somebody is wearing. Okay, I'm totally forgetting the question again. But Ricky was, essentially Ricky was participating in a sequence where he had to come in well before he ever was on set. He was dealing with wardrobe, who was picking his colors, checking his hair out, picking his jacket, his pants, his shirts, and so on, and his hearing aid, and the earrings he was wearing because the movie kind of fetishizes his ears somewhat. So at the beginning of the scene when Freddy cuts his ear off, we're in a hallway filming in Pasadena. And that was after we'd already done about 3 months of development on the scene because he's not wearing a single makeup. He's wearing 10 different makeups. And we filmed for 10 different days because every time we cut, it's usually over to another version of the makeup that has another mechanism inside it. And we're trying to make them all cut together so that you don't know. You're looking at 10 different makeups and puppet heads. We made about 4 different puppet heads. These effects were all created, I used that word, sorry. These makeups and prosthetics were all created and designed by Chris Robbins and Nick Mara. They were the supervisors for John Beekler and John Foster of MMI Incorporated. I was working underneath Chris and Nick, but also underneath John Beekler. And John, at that point, I had come back from Japan on a film in 1989. I guess I was 20, 21, 22 years old. Wow. And it was a kind of a supernatural World War II period drama, and featured a lot of Freddy Krueger type mysticism and supernatural action with a villain that was somewhat similar to Freddy Krueger. Probably was inspired to a degree by similar characters. And when I was introduced to John Beekler by Jeff Farley, who was on set for Taito Taisen, that was the Japanese film. I think Jeff was working in Romania and was not able to work on most of Freddy's Dead until he came back from the Romanian show. But John Beekler talked to me and said, well, can you slice off somebody's ear? And I said, well, I've done that before. And I had done that before on a very, very low budget feature. But in this situation, we're talking about Freddy Krueger, and the idea, having seen the Freddy Krueger films up until this point, the idea of having a camera way up close to a makeup where you're staring at a guy's ear, or the lack of his ear that has been removed. That is about the most difficult, next to cutting off perhaps somebody's nose, that's about the most difficult thing you could ask a makeup designer to do, is create the illusion that a protrusive part of their head has been removed. We had to do that by using Lon Chaney's techniques from 1925, The Phantom of the Opera. We glued Ricky's ear to the side of his head, glued layers of rubber to his ear to keep it stuck to the side, to flatten as much as we could. There was a sculpted prosthetic that went on one side of his face that angled up his face gradually so that hopefully you wouldn't be able to tell that we were doing some trickery on you. And then after that, all the successive versions of the makeup involve bladders and mechanisms and balloons that are inflated. So all told, this was just one sequence of the film. I worked on a few other scenes, but this was kind of like the big deal, and was many days in filming and months in preparation. And before Ricky filmed, he came into MMI and we molded his entire body. We made dummies of him. We made dummies of him standing up. We made dummies of him with his arms up like this. We had screaming faces, painful faces, different kinds of false heads. It was literally months in the preparation, and if it worked well, you didn't notice any of that, and you didn't realize you were looking at two different stunt performers, one actor, and 10 days of filming, mostly in sequence, because we were trying, we didn't know if it was gonna work. We would get dailies about 2 days after we filmed, and then we'd look at them in the studio on video and determine, well, is this working or not? You know, like, does it really look like his ear is gone, or can you just tell what's going on? And at a certain point, we just kind of signed off because we could see that the DP, I don't know his name, but the people in charge of photographing all these makeups were quite on top of it. They'd done it in several films. They knew how to light rubber. They knew how to light puppets, rubber on actors. And so we were in very good hands photographically. And for example, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know who was going to score the film. We didn't know there was going to be a Brian May score to the film. Chris and Nick, the supervisors, were big fans of Mad Max, and constantly in pre-production before we got to set, they were constantly quoting and screaming lines from Mad Max. Like the Knight Rider, I am the Knight Rider, I am a rocker, I am a roller, I am an out of control, and all that stuff. And Chris and Nick just thought it was terribly funny. Like, they liked the Knight Rider. They were fans of him before he blew up. Right. And I had seen Mad Max on a double bill with Friday the 13th in 1980, and that was a hell of a night. It was like 6 o'clock was Mad Max, car violence, extreme vengeance, And then 8 o'clock was Friday the 13th, and Kevin Bacon getting the arrow bit, which turned into, like, because I knew I was, 13, but I could tell that there was more going on than just a rubber neck on Kevin Bacon, because the blood couldn't squirt out unless there was some type of device holding the blood in and pressurizing it, so that when the arrow comes out, the blood can only gush out that way. That turned into the method that became the impalement for John Doe. What was the actor's name for John Doe? What was that gentleman's name? What was that guy's name?
Sean Greenblatt.
Yeah, wonderful guy. I didn't work with him much, but Chris had sculpted a chest that came out like this, that was like an arched back. So that in his mind, in the dream, he's falling forward down onto these spikes that Freddy has put there, like a Wile E. Coyote, very Warner Brothers. And when he's actually dying in the real world, however, he's flipped over on his back. And we see the activity of the spikes plunging into him front ways. So we get to see two perspectives of his death, one from his dream and one from the real world as we would see it. So there was a mechanical chest that was built that each hole or each spike was an individual gag that had a cable pull that pulled the shirt down into that area. And then there was a blood tube hooked up to a Hudson sprayer. And if there were 5 tubes, 5 holes, we would hit all the cables, pull them all at once, and then the guys on the Hudson sprayer, including I think Mike Deek and Jeff Farley, the blood would gush. The fabric was specially treated so that the blood would gush out of the holes but not gush into his clothing and turn him red, because we were trying to avoid an R rating. No, I'm sorry, we were trying to get an R rating. And it was unspoken. We didn't talk about it. There was no need to talk about it, but it was like, this is not Dawn of the Dead, and we can't just get away with pumping gallons of blood and turning everybody's white shirt deep red. It's not going to happen. They're going to cut it. We don't do that. We're not making stuff to get cut. We're going to de-blood everything as much as we can so that we get that R. And we got it.
Thank you so much
I could tell you more. I was going to give Tony a 3-minute biography of myself, but I just like to say I was born in Virginia in 1967. I was adopted. I don't know who my biological parents were. I still don't. Think about that.
Rob Matsui.
I was adopted in Los Angeles at the age of 2 months. And I've been interested in prosthetic makeup all my life. And I'm, 50? How old am I now? 57. I just had a birthday, okay? I'm obviously going on way too long. I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming here. Good wishes to you all. I'm gonna pass the mic to the next person. God bless you.
Mr. John Skipp here. Now you had the task, you got to continue a storyline of Alice. Tell us a little bit about continuing the story and also, coming up with your own Freddy Krueger films.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. Okay, so I was one of the writers on Nightmare 5. I don't think it's a very good movie. I hope you all agree.
How dare you?
I'm just saying.
I liked it.
Did you really?
I liked it.
I'm glad that somebody did.
I did. I saw it in theaters. I
Right
liked
on,
it.
right on. Yeah, okay, so how did this happen? Back in the early to mid 80s, I was writing with a guy named Craig Spector, and we wrote a vampire film set in the New York subways called The Light at the End. And a couple of other writers, Clive Barker, Dave Scow, a couple other people, started being called splatterpunk. And DeLuca was a big fan of splatterpunk. So when it came time to do Nightmare 5, 4 having gone very well, all the films having done very well, they decided that they were going to kind of rush the sucker out, and they decided to do a splatterpunk cattle call, in which all of the hardcore horror writers who were writing novels at that particular time were brought in to pitch a story. So we did, and we won. And so we had 2 weeks. I love hearing that you guys had like months to put together. We had 2 fucking weeks to write this and we handed it in, and somebody else handed in a script at the same time, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon. They didn't like his script. They loved our script, so they fired us and hired the other guy to write it. And 6 writers and 13 drafts later, they had the movie that they did. And I don't know what to tell you, man. It's funny to go up here. I love that first one that we just watched. I love the shit out of that. That was what made us want to do it. And it was really fun to make the motorcycle guy turn into his motorcycle. And it was really fun to have the nice lady tread her own body. And I mean, one of the things that we did was have everybody graduate from high school because we thought that that would be the place to go. But it's what I love about Freddy and what I love about the Nightmare films is the collective unconscious, the fact that we're going into the dreamland, and it kind of invites us to understand how that works. And that was a lot of what we wanted to do, is like kind of explain how Freddy got into your head and how you could get into his. So basically, we all dream in the collective unconscious. There's just this one, like it's like the mind of God, and we're all kind of floating around in it. And if he can get into our heads, then we could get into his and find out what made him and why he became the monster he was. And you know, having been born from the rape from 1,000 lunatics of a nun in a convent, and you know, what did those nuns do to this bastard kid that wasn't supposed to be born in the first place? And we kind of explained how he got twisted. It got kind of labyrinthine, and the interesting thing was when we handed the script in, they're like, this is like if Stanley Kubrick made a Nightmare on Elm Street film. We're like, yeah, cool, huh? And they were like, no. Our asses were out the door. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else you want me to tell you about it. It was a fucking weird experience. I'm just saying. But yeah, man, I love the way that they play the dreams. I thought, you know, Wes was really brilliant, and I'll never forget seeing the very first one and seeing the arms stretch across the entire alley. I mean, that was the moment that I knew that something real was going on. Nobody had ever done that with dreams in cinema before. Nobody had ever quite gotten into the unconscious that way and played it that hard. And I'm not saying that people hadn't done cool, surrealist shit. I'm just saying that nobody had ever done what he did, particularly in the context of a mainstream horror film. And it totally changed the game. So I have deep and abiding respect for almost all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films.
Thank you, Zack.
Miko.
Hello. Now you got to play Dylan in the movie that brought Freddy back. He had died, but now you get to be in this movie.
Wait, hold on. Miko fucking Hughes! Oh my god, New Nightmare! One of the great child actors of all time. Come on now. Thank you. That's how we got. I got to bring energy up. Because we're talking about Miko fucking Hughes. Okay, let's start over. Let's go back.
Tell us a little bit about being Dylan, and tell us a little bit about the new project for Dylan's new Nightmare. You know, or tell the fans about
Sure.
what you have out there.
The process for New Nightmare, I remember I was 7 during the filming of New Nightmare, and at that time, Freddy was this force, this pop culture icon that kind of transcended horror, at least at that point when I came into the series, where I had never seen I hadn't really seen horror movies at all at that age, but I knew who Freddy was. There was a breakfast cereal. There was like a Freddy breakfast cereal. There was Jason. They were like the claws and the costume was every Halloween. You didn't have to see the movies to know this character. And I was so excited to be a part of it, to even be able to audition. And after I knew that I booked it, I wanted to see it. I watched the first one to at least kind of know what I was coming into, and it was like a dream. It was, you know, I worked on a lot of things when I was a kid, and I know Pet Sematary I don't remember much because I was really little, but
Give it up for Pet Sematary, come
I
on.
also tried to do that, but people ask me that a lot. Thank you. But New Nightmare was just fun. Like, I got to fight Freddy. I didn't die, I win. Like, I lived through it, which not a lot can say. And it was Wes was the best director that I've ever worked with. I've worked with many great directors, but it was so stress-free. He was so soft-spoken, and everything he said carried weight. He wouldn't say much, but when he said it, it just had a force behind it somehow. And he surrounded himself with wonderful people that knew what he was trying to do. It was like family, that set. And we finished on time and under budget, which is rare for a lot of feature films, at least from what I know. And it was a complete honor to be a part of it. And I look back as it was my favorite project to ever work on. Excuse me, fighting a little, of course. But speaking to what you said about Dylan's New Nightmare, so for those that may not know, there was a short film. It was completely Indiegogo, fan-funded. Somebody approached me at a horror convention saying, would you like to reprise your role as Dylan 30 years later? And I was like, I don't know. You get a lot of crappy horror scripts. You read at horror conventions, people trying to do stuff. And I read it and I was like, oh, this is actually really clever. Like, if you were gonna do this story again, how would you do it? This is kind of cool. So COVID hit, we got delayed. It kind of worked in our favor because we just had more time to like prepare and everything. I think it turned out well. It's kind of a love letter to the fans. New Nightmare was not the biggest box office success, but it was, at least from what I hear, probably biased because those are the people that are coming up to my table at these conventions. But it seems to be a fan favorite, and everybody who has seen it seems to like it, which was what we were going for. That's all we can hope for. It got demonetized on YouTube. It was sailing the first week it came out, and then because there's self-harm in it, it's a horror movie. Come on, what do you expect? YouTube was like, nah, so all the organic growth kind of got squashed. I'm assuming a lot of people that are here might already know about it, but if you haven't seen it, check it out. It was really cool. We don't know if there will be more. We hope so. We like the idea. I always said from the get-go, I can't even believe this is happening, so if that's all it is, I'm very happy, but if we can do more, that would be great. And I'm just happy to be part of this crazy nightmare family. I'm so thankful y'all are here tonight. Thank you.
Miko, Coffee, Hughes. Zack Ward. All right, not the first time you played a yellow ID, and you got the unique opportunity to portray Freddy Krueger as this brother character of yours in Freddy vs. Jason. Tell us a little bit about evoking Robert Englund's style.
Oh, I just imitated him. He was right there. I asked him how to do it. He told me I did it wrong, and then he made me do it right. Thank you. Honestly, Robert Englund was right there beside me, and one of the things he taught, and you guys will dig this, is he said that the glove, you have to act like it weighs 30 pounds. And he said he took that inspiration from the choreographer who did All That Jazz and Cabaret.
Yeah, Bob Fosse.
Bob Fosse, I always forget his name. So, because apparently Mr. Fosse was an awkwardly shaped little man, and so he would do all these weird arm gestures, and if you watch how he walks, he goes, I'm walking like Bob Fosse, and dropping the hand down, that's where the hack came from. Yeah, so then literally I'm on set, I got all these prosthetics on my arms that took forever, and a lot of nudity. You're welcome. And then, so he would be talking to me about how to sound like him, and oh, that's right, they all forgot! You know, that type of stuff. And then,
Got it!
thank you. So that was, having him teach me directly was fucking awesome. Like, everybody here just fanboys over Freddy Krueger and Robert Englund, and so do all of we. So to be working with him and having that experience was just beyond awesome. So really enjoyed it, and as you saw in the film, I'm in a pool full of blood, a bathtub, and as you can tell, I'm already red to start with. And then that stains your skin, and I look like a ginger smurf for like 10 days, with like hot red. So yeah, it was awesome. It was a great experience.
For Resident Evil fans, just the other week it was the 20th anniversary as well for Resident Evil Apocalypse, I believe.
Oh, Resident Evil Apocalypse. Is that 20 years old already?
Already.
God damn, I'm old, bro. And I got Christmas Story, which is 42 years old.
That's a great.
Hell yeah, son. I'll make you say, Uncle Big Boy.
Scott Farkas. Right here.
I know, isn't that amazing?
Holy mountain.
Well, thank you again, Zack. Now let's go on to the writers of Freddy vs. Jason. Incredible Battle of the Titans. How did you, navigate being able to, treat Freddy very well and as well treat Jason very well?
Just say something.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Tell us a little bit about, the writing process and while trying to treat Freddy Krueger,
Right.
both of these characters equally well, but also having them really, tear each other apart.
Yeah, okay, well, let me just start with happy fucking birthday, Freddy Krueger. 40 years young. He looks great, doesn't he? You know what? That's an interesting question. The first thing we did was we looked at this movie. And this is kind of the thing that informed us. We wanted to get back to when I saw this movie when I was 14 years old. Strangely, I was living in South Korea and I saw the poster and I was like, holy shit, what the hell is this? I go in, and in South Korea, you could smoke in the theater. And in all the scary parts, you would just see people starting to light up. All the cherries, and the audience light up. And I was scared shitless. I'd never seen anything like this. But anyway, screenwriters that we are, this movie is just something that first of all, we marvel at, and then that we're just envious of. Jealous as fuck, because the concept is so incredible. It's just unbelievable, the idea of being afraid to go to sleep. Eventually you're gonna have to go to sleep.
Now you drink a lot of coffee.
And the crazy thing is, where did the spark come from for this idea? And it came from an art, and some of you probably already know this, an article in the Los Angeles Times about a young Cambodian man who thought he was going to die if he fell asleep, right? And that ended up happening. He died. He went to sleep and he died. And then they found coffee that he was hiding in the closet, just like you see Nancy bring from under the bed. He had it in his closet. This is a true story, LA Times. You can look it up right now. That's where Wes Craven got this idea. But then he turned it into this fucking masterpiece, which we're still talking about, or which we're kind of, you know, riding Wes Craven's coattails. You know, it was a blast to just kind of dive into the sandbox he created. You know, I'm not gonna talk much about Jason, but wow, we're just lucky to even be a part of it.
I am going to talk about Jason. Happy Friday the 13th. We're going to decide once and for all right now. We wrote Freddy versus Jason. We got an audience here. We're going to find out once and for all who's going to take it. I want to hear the Freddy fans. Ready? Freddy! I honestly did not think it was going to be that bad. Any Jason fans? I don't even know if I can call it. Miko Hughes?
I think it's a tie.
Miko says it's a tie.
They're both on the Mount Rushmore of horror. You can't call a winner on that.
It's not Miko Hughes, it's Miko fucking Hughes.
You announce me at every event. I love that.
Did you have this question for the second half of Freddy vs. Jason, or was it just for him? No, I can't do that. Question?
Yeah, no, let's take a look at the ending. Tell us a little bit about how you figured out how you could even wrap it up while satisfying everybody.
Oh, wrap up the conclusion of the movie. I wanted a sequel, personally.
Yeah!
I wanted a sequel. The sequel, it was winter, by the way. It would have been great. It was snowing. Oh, God, Jason in the snow. Wouldn't have been good.
That's not Freddy versus Jason.
Oh, that's not Freddy versus Jason. I'm sorry. I wanted a sequel to Freddy versus Jason, too.
We've been drinking, it's fucking Freddy Krueger's birthday. Don't judge us.
Look. This time was the series really well.
Thank you for that segue.
Okay, as I was saying, if anybody knows any bit of Freddy Krueger trivia, they most likely got it from the Elm Street Legacy. Tell us a little bit about putting that together and what it was like cracking open these legends' heads and feasting on the gooey insides.
At the time, my partner in crime, Dan Ferens, and I were sort of kicking around Hollywood and making documentaries and behind-the-scenes sort of bonus features for Blu-rays back when studios actually cared about that stuff. We did all of the Friday the 13th movies for Paramount. And as soon as that was wrapping up, the Elm Street remake was about to hit from Platinum Dunes, and that seemed like the perfect time to put together something for Elm Street. So we concocted a feature-length documentary for Elm Street and pitched it around to like all the studios and companies that we could, and they all went, nah. So we basically just decided to do it ourselves out of a small little studio and using my apartment as an editing bay. And we brought in our buddy Tommy Hudson and Heather Langenkamp, and we made like a little announcement online about it just to get some hype. And at the time, we only had Heather, nobody else.
How about a hand for Heather?
So we did several months of research and got on the phones, and 103 interviews later, we had this giant 4-hour behemoth of a documentary that I didn't think anybody would watch. But it was a really cool experience because I got to meet a lot of amazing people, including many folks on the stage, and it was sort of like, as a fan, going to Candyland, because we got to go to people's houses and they unveiled their Freddy Krueger collections and props, and of course, getting to interview Wes and really cementing all his feelings on the franchise was just an amazing experience.
He hated us, didn't he?
No.
You guys bought that? Jesus.
We've been drinking.
And that's about it. The life of a documentarian is very exciting.
I have to tell you something, man. The best thing that came out of Nightmare 5 for me was meeting Andrew, because we wound up then making films together for the next several years, and that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we spent several years doing a lot of Gonzo short films for festivals. We did a little movie called Tales of Halloween together, a segment for that. So yeah, a lot of great friendships and partnerships and creative things shot out of that documentary. So very happy.
Everybody, the artists behind the Elm Street legacy, give them all a big clap.
Let's give a wave to the people up there. Hello. Hi there. Yoo-hoo. You guys are war fans.
Get together!
About that. Any genre, honestly. And these are speaking of people that wrote Shark Tale.
I don't know. This is a photo. Hello, everyone. Look at all the cameras. Hey, guys. Like what? You like that, don't you? You like taking pictures. You like that.